Good afternoon or good morning. Welcome, everyone. This is the webinar Drop Everything and Train, including your current L&D programs. This is one in a series of webinars where we connect for 30 minutes to bring to life the challenges we see in the market and what we can do about them. During today's session, Raphael, Axion's Global Transformation Lead, will guide us through a discussion around how business leaders can implement new winning strategies, building and nurturing new cultural attributes through deliberate practices. We will host a Q&A at the end of the session, so if you have any questions that come up during the session, feel free to use the questions function in your control panel, and then we'll answer them at the end of the session. So let's get started. On to you, Raff.
Thanks, Barbie, and thanks to all of you that have tuned in or listening to this recording after the fact. I see lots of folks attending from all over the globe, lots of different time zones, clients, peers, friends, some new friends it looks like, and a number of partners in purpose, as we like to call them. I see some Latino friends from South America and Mexico. Buenos dias, amigos. Nice to have everybody on. So let's dive in. We're gonna talk about this D3&T. I like to call it the leadership mantra for this fourth industrial revolution, as a way of really trying to help focus myself and others on the deep work to be done to lead us through the transformation. D3&T is borrowed from a community that I belong to, and friends of mine from the many professional CrossFit champions who run a podcast and blog called Barbell Shrugged, which borrows from, of course, Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged famous novel. And I love the overlap of the philosophical principles related to conscious capitalism, related to long-term sustainability, and the intersection of many domains of success across the I, the we, and the it, the self, the team, and the task, and how it all works together to overcome the difficult challenges that face us today in the world that we live in terms of the VUCA environment with so much going on. And of course in there, it's all about the control that we do have in terms of how we respond to that complexity and to that VUCA. And as many of the L&D professionals and business leaders, all of which are on the line, it looks like here, it's about how we approach adult development and how we look at it from a more integral standpoint. So whereas the Barbell Shrugged folks and CrossFit champs and SEAL Fit communities and the Spartans and the Muddy Buddies or the Mud Runs and all those other different sufferfests that approach it from what looks like a physical domain, it's actually all kind of leveraging the physical, the mental, the emotional and spiritual aspect of integrating those together to lead us to higher levels of performance, higher levels of relationship, and helping us accomplish things that we might not have thought we could accomplish in our lifetime. So that's kind of the context for all of this, and I'm not sure if those of you on the line were all together with us on the last webinar, Chop Wood, Carry Water, which was about looking at this as a lifestyle choice, and that it's never-ending, that it's an ongoing, perpetual endeavor towards higher levels of standard that help us get more out of life and more out of our business and more out of what we want. Those of you that know me, that I have worked with extensively, some of you clients on the line, know that I have my own biases and lenses that I am bringing to this conversation, that I bring to the transformation work. I have spent the better part of the last decade and a half working specifically on innovation strategy as the owner, president, and a practitioner of an innovation consultancy here in Chicago and Connecticut, delivering innovation strategy, innovation assets, working on culture of innovation, and innovation leadership work for the Fortune 100, and have been, since then, I spent a couple of years independently embedded inside of companies as business transformation leads, for companies working through significant transformation. My former business partner and I wrote a book called Feed the Idea Monkey to focus on what matters most. It's an innovation leadership, kind of a mindset book around the two most powerful innovation enabling forces that come together, create a lot of tension, potential stress and conflict, but if it's dealt with in a way that's very healthy and generative, that is what drives companies from the current level to the next level. That is what gets us to the future that we long to go to. I've had the benefit of the last 2 months prototyping a lot of what we're going to talk about today inside of 2 different CLO forums and talent management forums, one in San Francisco, one just this past weekend in Tucson, where I got to verbally prototype a lot of these interesting aspects, especially kind of the one that was used around the provocative title related to dropping even many of our current L&D programs in service of the essential business needs and the essential transformation needs today. And that's really the heart of what we're going to talk about. And it's all in service of, if your company, like many others, like 4 out of 10 CEOs suggest that they expect to be running significantly transformed companies in the next 3 years, according to the KPMG most recent CEO study. If that's the space you live in, there's a lot of work to be done. The majority of companies are not ready for transformation. They haven't built up these muscles. They don't have the expertise in-house. They've got amazing amounts of inertia that comes from the success formula that has served them very well over the last many years. And in response to the market, in response to all the changes, CEOs and the teams are looking at how they're going to transform. Many of the big tech companies are going from software or hardware to more cloud-based, more service-based type transformations, full business model transformations, all being done through people, which is going to require the ability to actually move everyone towards new capabilities. And typically, these are the 5 things that people and companies think about when they talk about leading a significantly transformed company. It is intended to create a whole new system, one that is more relevant to the market, delivering on the new market needs, and it comes with expanded capabilities, capabilities that make it possible to be shifting what those attributes are based on the changes in the market, whether it's based on population changes, based on preferences, based on technology. The ability to be adaptable consistently is a big piece of the transformation intentions. The ability to cultivate new levels of energy, creativity, productivity. How do we shift our mojo or get our mojo back so that we can actually put enough of the wholehearted effort into the transformation, which is typically what it requires, since it's no easy feat. Ability to invite new levels of understanding, relationship, and accountability. I mean, the way that people relate to empowerment and how they use their power and discretionary effort in support of the business needs. And lastly, much of the transformation intentions is to learn how to use power differently, how to build and source from a more diverse and strategic and effective balance of power versus many corporations that are out of balance today and stuck in command and control mindsets, stuck in fixed mindsets that are, our own barriers to the growth mindset that we need to source from to get to where we want to go. So the gist of our time together is going to be around how do we help leaders be more ready? How do we help ourselves be more ready? And let's start by picking up where we left off in the last webinar, which is all focused around reorienting business leaders' relationship to the opportunity of lifestyle transformation. And I like to say, don't just be a better leader, be a transformation leader. Let's look at it that way. And since most of our business strategies today and these growth strategies require significant transformation, just to make it simple, we're all going from our own current level to our next level. And we all have to work through that transition between the two. As an individual, I have my own current level working towards the next level. As a team, as a company, as a family, as a community, If we are motivated enough to be pursuing a next level, we're going to have to work through that transition and be masters of that transition, be masters of understanding what are the patterns that happen inside of most transitions, and make sure we see it coming so we can see it through and more effectively get our group there. This is a pretty textbook type word cloud view of what cultural attributes might look like inside of companies that are in terms of current level, next level, right? Most of I would say the only time I'm involved or my team is involved, whether it's from the innovation aspect or from the conscious business aspect, the culture and leadership transformation aspect, it's when there is a current level that looks like this with these traditional kind of less than resourceful type qualities, and there's the intention to shift towards one that is far more resourceful, far more purposeful and beneficial to the organization. And those of you that see all these words here, I mean, this could match almost 90% of the companies that I've spent time in over the last decade or so. And I love seeing, curiosity as one of the next level desired attributes. And it's one of the interesting pieces of if you talk with the leadership team about curiosity, it's obviously in service of collaboration and being more innovative. And one of the tricks to helping to open their mind of, well, how do we get to being better at curiosity? How do we build a culture that's more curious? And don't you have a workshop or a module that can just make people more curious? And the answer is typically, yeah. But the way to get to it, the way to get to that curiosity muscle is through the humility muscle. How would some of you leaders like to work on the humility muscle for a while? And that usually creates a little bit of a pause, and we go, oh, that's interesting. That makes me feel a little uncomfortable. I'm not sure if I want to work on the humility muscle. I'm not sure what you're saying about me or what you might be suggesting. And that becomes one of the interesting ways of how we start to unpack what might be holding us back from this shift. And clearly, the folks that are responsible for the transformation are all super successful, extremely bright, very accomplished and experienced executives, and yet they feel trapped in this current level, and whatever they've been trying to do over the last many years to get to that next level hasn't been working sufficiently enough, so there's sufficient level of dissatisfaction at the current level, enough to open them up to try new things, more drastic measures, if you will, to get to that next level, because time's ticking. And as we talk, and typically talk, is innovation, leadership, transformation, learned capabilities, muscle groups that have to be developed and trained in the context of that lifestyle shift. And they're muscles that are typically not as visible because they're in our heads. It has to do with our mindsets, but there's ones that help us see more, work better, and feel stronger. And see more is about opening up the aperture of our minds, opening ourselves up to think and move and consider things beyond our own paradigms, beyond our default habits, our default biases and mindsets, so that we can have more options, create a better strategy, and work together better with people. And typically when we feel stronger in the face of uncertainty, we're able to do more of the resourceful things that get us to where we want to go, as opposed to behaving in a way that Keegan and Leahy in their most recent book called An Everyone Culture talk about how we all have this secondary job, this second job that we don't even know we're doing, and it's a reactive, fear-based, safety-based, pretend I know what needs to be done even if I don't, and save face, make sure I look good, more so than admit my vulnerabilities, admit where I have gaps, don't even admit them to myself perhaps, but they suggest through their work at Harvard studying adult development that we all have this part-time job where we spend 30% of our time covering up the fact that we don't feel strong. So how, if we can get all these things to work together to help us feel stronger, greater likelihood that we'll be more open, more curious, etc. And we talk about that in the context of the work to be done, not just being horizontal learning where we add skill sets to our current level, but instead it is raising our consciousness, elevating our sense of awareness to higher levels so that we can, in a sense, upgrade the operating system and deal with more complex subjects, get to the complex problem solving more quickly. And that requires the deeper work focused on mindsets and biases to get us there. So that's what we're talking about. I just want to give that as context because that is the emphasis today. I'm not minimizing the need and the appropriateness of horizontal learning where and when appropriate, but in the context of transformation, most companies should be, must be deliberately, intensely focused on this vertical learning aspect of it. And that'll, you can be the judge of where you are in terms of your context, your priorities, and of course, how dissatisfied you are with the current level. And if you're not dissatisfied, there's no reason to shift. There's no gap, there's no opportunity for learning, there's no real need for transformation. And clearly not everything inside of the company needs to shift, not everything needs to change. Some things work great just as they are, and many things need to shift to get to that desired new level. And last time we talked about getting in the reps being the best way to train these muscle groups. You have to get in the reps. It doesn't happen overnight. You can't cram for it all at the last minute. How do you build a lifestyle where you're consistently getting in these reps and retraining or reprogramming so that you eventually get to new default habits? And as I talked about earlier, I said I had just come from a CLO conference out in Tucson this past weekend, where many of the CLOs across many different companies and companies from thousands of employees to hundreds of thousands of employees prioritized. This was the top 6 things they were looking for while they're at this conference. And it's one of those speed dating events where suppliers, sponsors, and corporations get together to spend some quality time together, get to know each other, see what's out there in the market in a very productive way. It was a great experience. And this was the list of things that meant the most to them coming in. High potential development, assessments, evaluation and measurement, analytics, and of course these things are high priority. These are very important things. How they all fit together in the context of transformation, what I heard from them most often in person, and what I heard from a new friend, Tamar Elkelis, who I met out in San Francisco, who was CLO of the Year back in 2010, and ran the CLO group for a mobile organization, is now working with VCs and has authored a number of books and has a new book coming out in November. Quite a controversial speaker, if you will, in these conferences, and how she talks about the future of the CLO potentially going away, not even being around 10 years from now, that it'll be much more based around the chief talent officer, which is far more embedded in the business, far more responsible with decision rights compared to the way it is today. So she's got a very interesting view of the future. And I think all of these things that we're going to talk about, and I suggested in the invitation that we're going to get into some undiscussables, and there are undiscussables that I think and feel and have observed and have prototyped and trial ballooned over the last couple of months that exist between the CLO and the business unit leaders. And we're going to talk about first, what is an undiscussable? It's a thought, a feeling, a belief, interpretation and inference that is secretly hidden by the owner from the rest of the group, from the rest of the world. It's kept inside my head. I don't talk about it, even if it's more beneficial for all of us to hear it. And the idea that any one of us who keeps an undiscussable creates a dilemma for ourselves. Sometimes we create a quadrilemma. There's a number of modules in our leadership training programs at Excellent that actually break down how to work through the quadrilemma, how to identify it, how to notice it, how to navigate and detoxify what's in there so that we can, in a very honest and respectful way, express our core truth, bring it, surface it in a way that's authentic, surface in a way that's helpful, and keep moving the group forward. I don't think we have time to go through this in the short time span of this webinar, but I would encourage you at the end here, my email's up, to shoot me an email. I'm happy to send you a digital version of the book that has all that content in there. It's super helpful, super useful. I want to talk more right now about an organizational undiscussable and how that shows up. A few examples here, and there's a few different ways to call it, or the ways that it's referenced in double bind theory, organizational contradictions is the example we'll talk and just walk through some of these. The idea that organizations seem to speak out of both sides of their mouth often, which creates confusion and conflict and tension, and often that undiscussable nature of the topic is made undiscussable by the authority figure to the subordinates, in the sense that it's such an undiscussable that you cannot discuss the undiscussable without fear of punishment, because it's too painful or uncomfortable to face as the leader. And instead, we all just wind up putting our kind of head back down, and almost head in the sand and say, okay, well, there's no use talking about it. Let's just plow through and see what happens, until we get to a stage of such a dissatisfaction with our results that somebody sticks their head up, risks the metaphorical being shot by sticking their head up to challenge and bring this up. But here are some of the core ones that you hear inside of companies trying to make this transformation. You hear proclamations and declarations of be innovative and take risks, and at the same time, you know that the culture and leadership has this almost punitive environment where don't make mistakes or there will be consequences. And the idea even that, yeah, take risks, be creative, be innovative, but the idea of being vulnerable is almost too embarrassing and too risky and often not approached. Another one, be collaborative and share knowledge, share learning across silos, across departments, but yet we measure and incent based on productivity, speed, and efficiency. And that's the ongoing kind of unresolvable dilemma of how you manage a system versus subsystems, and that tension there and how you navigate that. Another one of the contradictions is we're about people and relationships. We should work as a team versus the reality that results are really what matters, really what counts, and we're going to be evaluating you individually, so make sure you take care of yourself. And the idea of, we want to be a company that is customer-centric, but underlying that is this undiscussable imperative, but make sure your boss is happy first and not too inconvenienced with all of your customer centricity. And that creates textbook issues in companies. Those of you on the line are familiar with it, have expressed it in a number of different workshops and surveys. Another way of looking at it is called organizational defensive routines. Strategies, and this is just definitions of it, strategies that protect leaders from the embarrassment of these organizational contradictions, patterns that allow people to avoid responsibility for the inconsistencies in their walk and their talk. So leaders actually get to not be confronted with those inconsistencies, especially when it's undiscussable. And self-protecting strategies of a command and control model that get in the way of learning. This is kind of on the cost side. What's the cost of a defensive routine? And these undiscussables and the double binds is that they obstruct learning and reaffirm personal safety, meaning just do what's safe and be careful in this environment. It's not safe enough to try those crazy new things, and which creates an ongoing victim culture, a preponderance of energy focused on the negativity and injustice collections, like finding where all the problems are, and attacking each other, especially folks who question the feasibility of whatever the party line is, let alone anybody who challenges the status quo. And ultimately, the double bind I want to talk about next is where, in this space between CLOs and the business units, there's a lot of tension around the fact that part of the message that we hear from CLOs is that budgets are always tight, time is always scarce, and the pressure from leadership is make sure that training is practical and reasonable, and at the same time you have to prove the near-term business ROI for it, especially the soft skill mindset stuff, or the budgets are probably going to have to get cut further because this stuff just doesn't work. So there's a double bind in there where all of you on the line know that if you don't have sufficient amount of time and energy and attention to the mindset changes, then the mindset changes they never happen. It's not an easy fix. It's not an overnight, I read the book and now I'm fixed, now I get it. Intellectually, all the leaders can understand it, but it takes a lot more time to get in the bones to change those default habits in service of these new ones. And that's the primary thing that we're going to talk about. I love this cartoon, I'd like your honest, unbiased, and possibly career-ending opinion on something. as a great way to invite people into the discussion of Undiscussables. And here's 3 that are specifically related to the CLO and business unit leaders. Here's how I have heard them. These are how I've observed them, and these are the ones that I've tested and refined based on feedback from business unit leaders and CLOs. And I'm more new to the CLO world than the business unit leader world. Typically, my clients have been on the business side, the chief innovation officer, the president or CEO and his or her report directs that are leading the transformation strategy, the innovation strategy is typically the folks who I've worked with, so I've been exploring more on the CLO side. But here's what I heard for years from the business unit leaders who, often require a lot of prompting to include someone from AR, someone from learning and development in our innovation strategy work, in the culture of innovation work. It's almost like L&D was an afterthought to the project or to the strategy. And this is what I would hear. I would hear from them that most L&D strategies and programs and corporate academies don't give us the training support or the outcomes that we need to help deliver on this increased complexity and pressure of our new, innovative, differentiating, transformational, winning business strategy. I just don't think L&D gets it. Like that's why they're an afterthought. That would be the answer I would get when I would suggest that I'm surprised that L&D wasn't included in the project team for the innovation strategy. Now on the flip side of it, over the years when we finally were able to get L&D and HR folks included, I would hear this, and I hear this more and more now as I go to these CLO conferences, that where CLOs say, even if we had robust and generously funded transformation programs, the business leaders' outdated leadership assumptions around what it takes to literally be transformed are not aligned with the realities of intensely focused, deliberate practice, which is what it takes to actually develop the new desired competencies and next level cultural attributes required to deliver on the strategy. And the sentiment around, I'm not sure business leaders see themselves as even needing to be transformed first in order to appropriately affect the system. And there was more of an inference that business leaders wanted us to fix everybody else without exposing the shortcomings of the leadership team themselves. So interesting dynamic, interesting level of tension, and you can see why that might be undiscussable. And that comes to a third, which I exposed to both sides here as, wow, this is an interesting undiscussable that we should make discussable, and we should talk about it. Because the question that would come up is, well, maybe neither group of leaders truly believe in the winning business strategy enough. Maybe we don't understand enough, we're not aligned with enough, we don't believe in enough to give the transformation effort their best effort. Now, there's no question everybody's putting in a lot of effort, but there's, as you all know, a huge difference between best effort and effort. And it may be that the relationship to the transformation effort or the understanding of it isn't worthy of best effort, and that's why it's not funded, and that's why leaders don't engage in a way that they put their oxygen mask on first and do their own training so they can be role models. They can be, not sending contradictory messages to the organization. So this is the piece of Undiscussable at an organizational level that I think is really interesting to the folks on the line and listening to this webinar. And how do we distill that toxic truth? What do we do with it? And what does it create, in the spirit of L&D folks? And is it possible even that L&D suffers from learned helplessness that is taught in the system? When there's those contradictions, those double binds create a sense of learned helplessness where we, like the elephant in this picture, as a baby who's tied to the stake with just a rope and is able to be kept, still. Eventually, the elephant grows to become massive in size and, of course, can easily break through this rope, but the learned helplessness has them trapped, believing that there isn't anything they can do, when, of course, they have the power, they have the ability to make change and break free from those chains that keep them trapped. And this is how, in my experience, and I've reworded this based on CLO feedback, this is what learned helplessness looks like on the L&D side. When a transformation is stuck, these are some of the watchouts that corporate inertia can create. And it's most often just framed in the context of failing to tackle the counterproductive dynamics of those double binds that exist in the dominant power system is where we get the avoidance of leadership's immunity responses. Well, don't do anything. No, don't say that. That'll trigger an immunity response, and we'll have to take 10 steps backwards. CLOs said that there's a tolerance of, an increased tolerance of leadership's misdiagnosis of what is really an interpersonal and cultural dysfunction that exists inside the organization. It's tolerated as an operational, structural, or procedural, let me say that again, procedural problem to solve, as opposed to an interpersonal and cultural thing to be fixed. So when you try to fix a problem with process, structure, standard operating procedures, and when in reality it's a much deeper, much more complicated relational problem to solve than it is fix it with structures, programs, and processes, because that's easier. And then lastly, the idea of addressing the leadership scarcity mindset and that huge problem of time is scarce, the time constraints that are real, and also perceived constraints. You see L&D being overly sensitive to what leaders care about in terms of being, give us a program that's reasonable, practical, and convenient. By all means, don't make it inconvenient for us. We're too busy running the business. We don't have time to actually transform. Oversensitivity, and I would say it's an oversensitivity to that as opposed to what's effective and what's more impactful. And I'm not saying there's one right answer. I'm just saying that's a discussion that should be had, but it often isn't. And you hear of L&D focusing on fixing behavior styles, which is almost superficial, versus the deep work of transformation, and it winds up looking like check-the-box productivity programs and just show that we've got these done and that we've gotten a lot of people through the program just to justify our success, to justify our budget. And lastly, treating development like an exercise event versus lifestyle training. And that's the piece I want to get into next. So this first part, and I'm not going to go through all these, but the idea that business wishes is a great way to reframe kind of the underbelly of Undiscussables. There's exercises you can do where you invite leaders to express their greatest wish for the company. These are some standard examples that pop up in most companies. What is the wishes that you have? And those tend to start to expose where drama, conflict, tension are being dealt with in an unhealthy way, much like an Undiscussable. And that's one way to get them out of people, up on the wall, so we can start talking about them, looking at them, and being curious about them. But ultimately, we can only take responsibility for ourselves and how we respond to this. Undiscussable, and the idea of this is a great way to approach it as a leader ourselves, and the idea that if anything is affecting, and I'm imagining saying this out loud to peers or subordinates or anybody, being able to, and superiors even, being able to say that, hey, if there's anything that's affecting you or our relationship at work, and you haven't found a way to talk about it to me or anyone else, I want to invite you to do so now, and I really want to make sure you understand the context of this invitation is right here. The context is I love the truth more than I do saving my own face, more than I am protecting myself, right? That I'm getting out from behind the safety of my second job of pretending I know everything and don't have any weaknesses to say the truth matters more, and if you have a truth that you haven't been able to share with me for whatever reasons, I'm inviting you to do so now. And part of what makes it a safe place to share is to let you know that I care more about you, our relationship, and our impact than I care about being right, which would be a tremendous shift to hear that come out of the mouths of many, financial leaders. And lastly, I'm willing to listen, learn, and grow with your help. We're in it together. We can learn this together. There is no one right answer. Let's go learn together. That's part of the context that is where you can create a safe place to get into Undiscussables. So, second piece, I'm going to fly through this. First is reorienting around the opportunity. Second is let's specify. Let's be very specific about the what and the how, the way that you approach long-term deliberate practice to build those muscles. And I like to say, don't just exercise, train. Let's tease that out. Let's make that difference, because this could be a little counterintuitive and almost hidden to many leaders, is because they're putting in effort, but we have to help them see what kind of effort is it that is required to get to the deliberate training that gets us to transformation. And those of you that are familiar with George Leonard and the book about mastery that unpacks all the 4 approaches to long-term deliberate practice and learning for adult development. Adult development is not a black box. It's not a mystery of how we learn. It's very clear. Dabbling, hacking, obsessing isn't the right way to do it. The approach to mastery is the only way adults learn over time to build sustainable habits that reprogram their existing ones. And it's this shift. It's this shift from reactivity, where we are currently unconsciously incompetent. We may not even be aware of the biases and things that have us trapped, and we need to shift over to a more expanded capability. Remember when we talked about why our company is transforming? One of the intentions is to create new capability. And the suggestion of this chart is that we do not benefit from the new competency until we move and retrain those default habits into new default habits, where we are consciously competent of the new behavior, the new mindsets, and the new things. And awareness, and I'm just going to flip through these. You can take a peek real quick here. Awareness isn't enough. Intellectual awareness of the problem isn't going to get us to the new capability. Awareness still leaves us in the consciously incompetent phase. And for all of the high-achieving executives out there that are responsible for leading the transformation, consciously incompetent isn't something we like to think of in terms of ourselves. We like to be thinking that we're moving towards conscious competence. And until we get to conscious competence, the organization does not benefit. Our behavior is still undermining the new business strategy, as opposed to amplifying the new business strategy, which is what it, and we don't get to that place until we become consciously competent, which is, if we look at the Prochaska's stages of change, let me take a quick sip of coffee here from my D3&t mug. If you look at the stages of change, which everybody's familiar with on the phone, the idea is as you move up and move along here, you can see consciously competent doesn't come until far beyond the action phase. And the action phase is when L&D gets involved, when pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation is all leading up to a agreement around what the new business strategy is, an agreement around what the new capabilities are that are required to be able to deliver on that new strategy in market. So when L&D gets involved and investment is made to do the training targeted at that new business, at the business strategy, this is the deep work. This is the time that action is necessary from everyone involved, especially at the top, especially where the default habits that control the system need to be rewired. That's what we're doing now. So it's not just tweaking the system or doing some of the exercises. It is adopting and training in the new lifestyle like you plan to do it forever. And not just doing it yourself, but mentoring, training with subordinates in a way that you're all learning together. And you're facilitating it. It's not just doing it yourself. It's you now. Your job is to be able to facilitate teams of diverse people through the change. Teams of diverse people to bring 110% of their curiosity, their intelligence, their creativity, their passion to bear on the tough work to get to those new habits and to get to that transformation. And it's not about getting it right. It's about working it right. That's where the L&D focus has to be. And if everyone's distracted with other L&D programs that are horizontally based or just random because we've always done it that way and it just came about and we never got rid of them, that's where it distracts from the training to be done, the transformation training. So, and I want to give you the watch-outs for exercising and tweaking so you see the difference and you'll see it quickly. This is a nice meme online. I'd do anything to lose 10 pounds except eat healthy and work out. This is the one I love that relates to business, where one of the gentlemen execs, is known to say, of course I embrace change. I'm all for transformation, but is it going to have to disrupt my day? Does it really have to be inconvenient for me? And obviously, usually there's someone much brighter at the table who's able to, have fun with this and be sarcastic even and say, yeah, what if we don't even change at all? Maybe something magical will just happen and we'll wake up and be transformed. And often, after years of transformation work, you actually start to wonder, and some of the specific behavior from leaders is like, is that how they think this works? Let's make sure we help them make very conscious choices about how they're engaging with training and not just exercising. And well, here's a metaphor for tweaking the system versus in terms of physical fitness and corporate fitness. I use the metaphor for physical fitness because it's easier to see. It's easier to point at. It's easier to notice if the muscles and the body composition is changing as opposed to what's happening inside of her head, more invisible on the corporate side. And dropping for the moment what the specific aspect or domain is that we're getting physically fit for, or the specific domain that we're getting corporately fit for, here's how it plays out. Physical fitness, usually tweaking the system looks like this. I bought the diet book, I swapped out unhealthy snacks, I tried some superfoods, tried to eat different for a while, but man, I still just seem to be eating my foods as usual that I'm used to. I love this one. I got a stand-up desk, look at my office, I stand up now. I'm physically fit, I'm on my way. I joined a gym, bought a Fitbit, got new workout clothes, but I'm not very consistent with it. I'm not sure why. I gave up again, blamed it on my age, nature, work, time, travel. Now I point at other people and feel better that I'm just not as out of shape as they are. So that happens a lot when we just tweak the system and we remain in this consciously incompetent phase. At the office, it looks like this. I went through the transformation training workshop. I watched some of the videos. I read some of the articles, skimmed the book. I didn't do the practice exercises in writing, but I did them in my head. It's a lot easier when I just do them in my head. I put the materials on my desk. They got buried. I laminated some of the tools, gave my books to my directs. I sent my directs to the workshop, and I'm becoming much more aware now of where the gap is in other people. I can point to it pretty easily now. And those are signs that you've tweaked the system but aren't moving towards consciously competent. And the metaphor around exercise and training, this is one of my favorite ones because it really shows the difference between the two, and which is why drop everything and train has so much more meaning to it. The idea that when you exercise, you specifically do it to lose weight or just get in better shape. And that's cool. That's fine sometimes if that's the goal. Training is to master a specific next level body composition goal. On the physical side, next level body composition goal. You have a specific goal. It's clear what it is. How are we going to get there? It's going to take long-term training. On the exercise side, the intent is to do some activity, to run, to ride a bike, to swim, to do that thing as opposed to master a next level performance goal. And the difference between doing, running, swimming, or jumping versus becoming a marathoner, becoming a sprinter, a swimmer, living the lifestyle of a swimmer like Mr. Phelps or any one of those Olympic athletes, any one of those domains is very different than just doing that activity casually. And the idea of training, the training that's necessary to become world-class, Olympic level, Medi-worthy competitor is far different than just showing up at the gym a few times a week, right? And I like to think of that in terms of us as corporate athletes. Like our goal isn't to just be better at customer centricity, curiosity, innovation, collaboration. We're professionals too. We're highly paid professionals. We need to be competing at world-class levels against world-class competitors to be able to win in the market. This is not some casual thing we can dabble in. We have to really be committed to this lifestyle of being a medal-worthy competitor in our chosen domain. Exercise side is to participate, it's event-focused. It is event-focused with very limited curiosity and understanding and empathy of what it means to be in it as a lifestyle, right? I can watch the Olympics, but I really don't get what it means to be Michael Phelps. I have no idea really in my bones what it means to be an Olympic athlete, because that's a whole different level of training than anything I've ever experienced or participated in. And that's why on the training side, if you're going to be leading, if you're going to be one of those folks that is an accelerator helping groups get to that next level, you have to be approaching it from a holistic, deep, very personal, very immersive and integrated approach. And that's why we talk about integral leadership. It's helping bring all of oneself to the challenge of transformation. Otherwise, it's superficial and it's not empathetic enough, and you as the leader will not understand how hard it is for your report directs and their report directs to get through the work to be done. Can you imagine when leaders say, I don't have time to go to training, I don't have time to do the homework. Can you imagine what it's like for the next level and next level after that, when they have no power whatsoever inside of the system, to all of a sudden now think that they're going to make changes or make a dedicated time and effort towards the training that's necessary when they didn't see their boss or their boss's boss make any effort to it or value it or demonstrate that they're learning as well. It just doesn't happen. That's what keeps it from ever happening. And many leaders aren't aware of it. They don't see it. They haven't been challenged in a way that brings it to life so they can make a different choice perhaps. And lastly, I'm going to use myself here as a guinea pig part of the show of what exercise looks like versus training. In my 30s, my early 30s, that's squishy Raff there on the left, the idea of exercise is for the effect it produces right now, to burn calories, get sweaty, stretch muscles, whatever. And sometimes that's all you need. When I was in my 30s, I thought it was fine. I exercised 3 times a week. I was in the gym pretty regularly. I was known as a guy who was always healthy. Very different from when I approach it now, my physical training, as a lifestyle endeavor, morning rituals, nighttime rituals, fully integrated approach, emotional, spiritual, mental, and physical, all combined together, surrounding myself with communities that help me train on all these different levels to a place that now it's a love of the process. It's a experience that falling in love with the delayed gratification of fulfilling that higher purpose and seeing of how it all connects together. And the difference between squishy Raff and Raff at 49 on the right comes from an approach and a specific approach to training as opposed to exercising. And lastly, and a counterintuitive way to accelerate the training, deepen the sustainability of it, of all the effectiveness of the training, is to get into what we call communities of practice, where you are learning in partnership and teaching leaders their ability to allow organic and formal communities of practice, virtual communities of practice, so that people aren't training alone, you're training together, because that's where the transformation really comes from. Lifestyle transformation happens in communities. This is one of my favorite quotes. Real change happens when those who do not usually speak are heard by those who do not usually listen. When a leader says, I don't know how to do this transformation thing, I know I have those muscles, I know I need to develop them just like I need my team to, we're going to learn it together, and this is going to be great, and I need to hear from you how I can be doing better and how we can be doing better. That changes that dynamic. That breaks down silos, that breaks down hierarchies, that breaks down the conflict and the undiscussable nature of many of the things that lead to unhealthy behavior inside of that undermines the business strategy. And that is, interestingly, the business leaders themselves that are demanding the new capabilities are the ones that typically undermine the very thing that they are mandating. And they often are contributing to the very things they complain about. I don't have enough time to get into this here. I want to stop and open it up for questions, but Etienne and Bev Wenger Trainer are I would say, the global thought leaders on communities of practice. They live in California, husband and wife team, much like Keegan and Leahy, who are just crushing it as far as taking the adult development learning and approaches to corporations to bring it to life, help it work faster, and love partnering with them and what they're thinking about to apply to corporate strategy. Some of the success factors here, they have great content and webinars and stuff on their website. This is an example of how they approach it. Don't have time to get into it, but so recap real fast. The 3 things we talked about is how to help leaders be more ready. How do we help them lead this transformation? First, it's reorienting them and yourself to the lifestyle opportunity. Don't just be a better leader, be a transformation leader. Choose it as a lifestyle. Specify what it looks like to be in deliberate training on the road to actually building the competency as opposed to living in conscious incompetence. Don't just train, don't just exercise, train, drop everything and train. Drop everything that stands between you and your dojo. Everything that stands between you and your training partners. Get to the training. There has never been one instance of working with senior leadership teams that are going through transformation where if they would also go through some time management skills and some leadership alignment activities, to give themselves permission to change the way they schedule their day to allow for more training, where they can easily find 3 hours of unproductive work, easily find 3 hours of unproductive time that they can fill with the transformation training. So it's not even an incremental amount of time to train. It's actually just repurposing time that is spent unproductively right now, and be much more focused on your training. So there's no excuses. Drop everything and train, and learn to train in communities of practice. The transformation goes quicker. I love it when leaders say, hey, what can we do about accelerating this? Okay, well, number one, stop delaying the training. Stop delaying your transformation. For starters, how about that? That's a great place to start. And change the dynamic with how you admit the vulnerability of gaps to learn, and how you engage in peer-based training, peer-based learning, so you can start to, in each one of your meetings, each one of the rooms you're in, change the culture one meeting at a time, one conversation at a time, towards a more resourceful next level. Questions. This is the time we'll stop for questions. We've got about 10 minutes or less. Barbie, I'm going to let you facilitate where the questions are coming from and which one or two we can squeeze into.
So we have a first question. How do you suggest corporate universities become more relevant to the business needs?
Oofa, corporate universities. I love corporate universities. And again, let me say this, the answer to that question, I'm going to make it be specifically related to a corporation in transition, a corporation that is behind the 8 ball, that needs to transform, should have transformed 10 years ago, has struggled for 10 years. I think they need to retool the academy to specifically be focused on the mindset, bias training, etc. And there's a number of ways to actually integrate lots of great leadership development programs, many of which are rooted in helping leaders recognize bias, work through bias, transform biases, and shift, like we've been talking about, to new default habits. Whether it's gender diversity and inclusion, I would say the essential pieces of that type of training work is mirrors the innovation work. It mirrors the biases that keep leaders trapped, with a different context, of course. But some of those are definitely interesting and necessary parts of it. Engagement and empowerment are all also ways of changing the way leaders use power based on their old success formulas, old paradigms, old ways of thinking, and the innovation stuff, which is driven by the ability to be curious, collaborative, better risk-taking, understand risk-taking. I think that's what's essential today. The essential need of business is to reimagine business and change the way leaders lead in the new normal in the face of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. Help leaders make complexity work for them versus against them, for crying out loud. And I know academies, if you have the luxury in your organization of having an academy, awesome. It can be so purposed or repurposed to just deliver on that it can be one of the, I would say, one of the greatest sources of ROI for the organization going through this transition. I hope that answered it.
Thank you, Raff. We have another question. Can you tell us a story that illustrates the sort of transformational shift that you have experienced with a group or a team?
A story. Oh, lots of stories. Yeah. The names will be changed to protect the innocents. I'm sure there's so many. Here's what I would also suggest too. There are so many case studies, so many stories on the Excellent website and under resources, I believe it is, published, documented case studies from global corporations and all different industries. I would invite you to go there, download, and I would invite you to contact me, and we can set up time to do a WebEx, which actually can get into the story with enough time and depth to have it matter, as opposed to just an archetypal story of challenge and heroic the hero story, the hero journey story, which I could tell about 1,000 times just based on the different leaders that have gone through it. But every single, I'll give you this, every single one of the stories that I am intimately knowledgeable around is because I've lived it with the executives, I've lived it myself, continue to live it, has been where you see the leaders after they have suffered for a number of years trying the old way but trying it harder, where you see the executives come together, do this year over year type work on themselves and with their teams to overcome their immunities to change, to work with coaches and work on their individual challenges, work with coaches to overcome their team immunities to change, to overcome kind of where they get stuck in those places that matter most, like those moments of truth where you're under stress, you're in the moment with relationships that some of them you don't necessarily like, you don't get along with, you don't have a lot in common, you don't know how to talk to each other, where in that moment when it matters most and you need those tools that you're going to learn in training, like you don't get to use those tools, you can't even reach back and find them in your backpack unless you have been practicing with them week after week after week. Unless you have practiced with them, you can't even find them to reference them to use when you need them most. And the transformation that you see leaders when they come through their personal learning journeys and their leadership alignment journeys and the partnership learning that they go through with teams and subordinates, and when it cascades through the company to multiple levels, and you all wind up with this shared language. Man, is that powerful. Man, the treasure that is available to you and each other, you guys deserve to experience that on a regular basis, and you have control over it. You, in most cases, are the dominant power structure that can make this shift happen if you just find time to work on yourself and engage in a different kind of a conversation. That's the story, the arc of the story over and over and over again. And I would invite you to go to the website and download the case studies and request a WebEx. Dig in, go deeper if you want to, or don't. How about that, Barbie?
Thank you, Raff. I have one more question before we close. We have 3 minutes. In my organization, many times we don't have a seat at the table to really understand what the business impact is that the leaders are looking for. How do you suggest getting closer to their needs?
Ooh, the seat at the table. There was a few breakout sessions at the CLO conferences I was at where the group would brainstorm around a flip chart, and it would be, one of them was this: how do we get a seat at the table? How do we earn a right at the seat at the table? How can we elevate the profile of L&D to make sure we get a seat at the table? And there was a number of conversations that were around a communication effort, and all I could think was, no, this is not a communication campaign. It needs to be authentic, and it needs to come from relationship. It needs to come from you, the L&D expert, modeling face-to-face with the other business leader peers, of which you are one of the business leaders. Most of the business unit leaders and the C-suite, they don't know how to do transformation. They're not PhDs in org psych, and they don't know what they're doing. They have no clue. Yet metaphorically, it's like they're the drunk driver, and they take the keys away from the sober driver, which is you. When it comes to L&D, you know how to lead L&D, and yet we let them take the keys away from us and make decisions for us. And what I think is really necessary, and forgive the drunk driving metaphor, that was just a superficial metaphor that I pulled on there. The idea of don't turn over the keys, though. Hang on to the keys. Be strong in knowing that you're the expert in transformation. You better be the expert in transformation. And get help and start brokering conversations with those leaders to make sure they understand it. Make sure that you're out of service to the business strategy. You're respectfully challenging what needs to be done and what the relationship needs to be and how they need to train and how they need to support and invest in the transformation. And I would say it's upon you to make that change happen, budget to budget, paycheck to paycheck, just servicing the requests of business unit leaders who don't really know how to do this transformation. Take leadership role, or otherwise you don't deserve a seat at the table. That's the other part of respectfully challenging CLOs. You are a business leader, let's act like it. Boom.
Raff, we're at time. Thank you so much. And do you want to show your contact information in case anyone wants to reach out to you? And we look forward to seeing you on one of our next webinars. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Barbie. Thanks, everybody.